Jody, thanks for stopping by. And, I can't wait to get in this conversation about strategic partnerships in business.
Yeah, I know it's a very fascinating topic, and I think it's one of the things a lot of business leaders lack focus on sometimes. And it's been something I really enjoyed doing with my clients.
I think it's a really interesting thing, especially when you have a product or service that really fits another company that can help drive that company further, add extra revenue. So you specialize in connecting corporate solutions to government needs. What makes a company truly ready to serve the government sector?
Well, obviously, there's certain things. There's a lot of changes going on right now in the government contracting space. Anybody who's in that space will tell you it's kind of a whirlwind as regulations that have been around for a long time have been changed. And I think most people in the industry will tell you they're changing for a reason. A lot of folks have said, hey, the way the government purchases things is problematic because there's probably, a handful of major defense contractors. And what was, at least from my perspective, what was happening was those defense contractors would acquire a company. Let's say they make toasters, right? They'd go back to the government and say, hey, here's a toaster for you guys to use. And the government would say, well, we don't need a toaster, we need a microwave. And the big defense contractors would say, well, we just bought this, toaster company. You got to buy our toasters, but we'll build you a microwave. And then, just kind of sticking the government with stuff that they may not need. And, love them or hate them, the current administration is saying, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're actually going to get the people in the government what they need, especially in the Department of War side. They seem to be moving much faster at this than federal law enforcement, and even the intelligence community, to be honest with you. But I think what you're going to see is a lot of small companies now that make toasters are going to say, well, we're getting out of the toaster business because they need microwaves, and they're going to be able to pivot much quicker than some of these larger companies are, because just the ability to be nimble and maybe have a bigger strategic perspective because they're not locked into certain systems or programs like the big ones, big government contractors are.
Interesting. And so before we get to I know you're talking about this government contract thing. What have changes have you seen? Because I think this is intriguing in this podcast.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And you can look at all the new FAR regulations that are going on, and how government purchasing procurement is going and changes that are going on with that. There's been just a plethora of changes that are out there right now. I would say some of the big ones, though, when we talk about are you ready to serve the government sector? There are still things, you have to be, there's FedRAMP is still in existence, at least for right now. That may change as well as far as what you have to do to get your technology or your software ready to be deployed into government systems or networks. There's also one of the other big things is, does your solution work on-prem, which means it cannot talk to the internet. You cannot, there's certain things that the government's going to require you cannot track. You can't look at what they're searching because they don't want anybody to know what they're searching because that's their government's doing a function, whether it's intelligence gathering or criminal investigations. Those functions can't be known to the outside world. Even to you as the quote unquote software owner, you don't get to know what they're using your software for because that's usually could be classified in many instances. And so that on-prem solution, your software has to work in that environment. You have to be able to give them a Docker that they can take behind their firewall, and whatever your billing model is going to be or your usage model is going to be, you have to be able to be comfortable with that. And not all software manufacturers or producers or creators are comfortable with that.
No, they're definitely not. And it's interesting. And you're going in more and looking at the government contracts. Have they changed also for people that are listening when it comes to small businesses and SMBs? They're not in more the software role, but are doing certain things like landscaping and different things for the government. Now, are these contracts being more checked out further, especially with a lot of the government fraud that's been happening?
Well, so Doge clearly had a big impact when they first came on scene to a lot of government contracts. There was a lot of companies that had one or two government contracts, and they got axed as part of that Doge process. For better or for worse, I think there's I think the intent, at least my understanding of the intent, was to cut down on some of the federal government spending and get rid of things that aren't actively helping the government. Is that what occurred? In some instances, probably yes, and in some instances, no. I think the government may have lost some tools and capabilities that were helpful to them that got cut, and they have to go back and find new solutions because those companies either went under or if your company's based on two government contracts and that's what your entire company's based on, and those two contracts get taken off the table, a lot of companies weren't able to recover from that. Now I'm mostly in software and technology, so I'm not doing landscaping and those kind of government contracts. And to be honest, the contracting piece itself is generally worked out between the company and the government, contracting officers. So I try not to get too involved with those, but I do understand the periphery of it and kind of what's going on with it. And I would just say I think that you're going to see a lot more small companies being able to come in as subs to some of these primes. And the hope would be is that the primes don't just start buying them all up because that leads us back with the problem we had before, which is, the couple of big companies just kind of owning the space and not being reactive to what the government needs as those needs shift, especially in this age of AI.
Right. No doubt. What is the biggest mistake businesses make when trying to break into federal partnerships?
Yeah, so it's funny. I always get several of my small business clients will come to me and say, "Hey, we want to get in the FBI." And obviously, as you know, I've served in the FBI for over 20 years, and so I say, "Okay, great. Which FBI do you want to get into?" And they kind of give me this weird look, like, "What do you mean? Like, there's one FBI?" I'm like, "No, no, no. There's not one FBI. There's multiple divisions within the FBI, and even within that, there's multiple field officers, 56 field officers within the FBI." As much as I'd like to tell you that it's all one organization, it's not. It's a bunch of different fiefdoms that are spread across a large territorial area and a large programmatic area as well. Different divisions within the FBI focus on different threats to the United States government and to the United States people. And so, certain software applications or technologies, that's the other thing I've found is sometimes hey, we want you to take us to the cyber division. Okay, well, that's great, but the technology you've got can also help our operational technology division or could help we're doing in counterintelligence or counterterrorism. So being able to kind of help them understand what their technology can be, how their technology can use operationally, because a lot of times they don't have that experience. They come up with really cool solutions. They have cool technology, but because they weren't operational, they don't understand how it could benefit kind of across a government agency's platform. And then obviously it's the same, whether it's CIA or NSA or Department of War, any of those components aren't, you just can't say, "Hey, get me into the US
Yeah.
Army." It's like,
Right.
okay, well, that's a monstrosity. You thought the FBI was big. The US Army is even bigger. And so trying to help them navigate what it looks like to partner with different federal agencies.
You broker these deals, right? You find a company and help them kind of attain these government contracts in a way with your team, right? In certain aspects.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah.
So I've got a team of folks, mostly retired government officials. Some are private sector, but and they have had experiences and networks in multiple different agencies across the government spectrum. And so when a company comes to me with a new technology, the first is I always want to see is, okay, what are you doing that's different than everybody else? Because there's a lot of folks that are coming in with technologies now, and everybody's using AI. Whether they have it or not is irrelevant. They put that in as part of their marketing tagline. And what I'm finding is that there's a lot of companies that are kind of doing very similar things. So I look for very niche companies. So
Mm.
somebody who's doing something either A, they're best in industry, or they have a lock on something. So like one of my clients has got 11 patents. So literally nobody could do what that particular client is doing. So it makes it much easier for me to take back to the government because I can say, "Hey, they've got 11 patents on file. Like nobody can do this particular software application and what they're doing." Or another of my clients is being used by 95% of the financial institutions across the world. Well, if 95% of the financial institutions are using that solution, it's probably going to be a good one for the government to look at because, it makes sense because the banks are using it because they're making
I
money.
got it.
And so, it would probably be helpful for the government with the appropriate application to use it as well. So those are the kind of things I look for before taking on a new client and then using my network of my team to get them in front of the right folks.
And that process sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. And what do you think is the reason why government some governments say no thank you to this business? What are the missing components? What are the missing things that they need?
You mean some companies not getting into government
Yeah.
space? Well, so not all solutions are helpful for government. What may work for healthcare, for instance, or the banking institutions, th those solutions may not be a good fit for government use for a variety of reasons. It could be, hey, the technology, yes, it's cutting edge, yes, it's very fast or new, but maybe it hasn't been pen tested. Maybe there's not the security elements that need to be there when you're dealing with government information or classified information. And so I could easily see those companies not wanting to get into the government space. It can be hard. It's daunting, especially if you don't have experience in that realm. I partner with some other big integrators to help them kind of navigate some of those things. And so I can take them back, but even that's expensive. I think getting FedRAMP is like over $1 million. So, some companies don't have the financial resources to do that in order to move into the federal space right now. So those
And,
are
and
all
then if
things.
they want to work with the government, Jody, you connect them to that government organization, but you do need to have someone who's involved in that government contract space, right? It can't be a direct contract between the government and that government entity and the business. There has to be also that government that broker, right?
So
Involved.
there's a couple different ways you could do it. You could use an existing government contract, which is typically with a larger system integrator or defense contractor that has an existing relationship with them, and they can add it on. There's a bunch of different mechanisms they can use to add on things to existing contracts. You could also go what they call sole source. So you could, if you have a very unique product that nobody else has, you could explain that and make that case to the government contracting officer for whatever government agency you're talking to, and allow them to sole source your technology into their organization. So you could do that as well, and both of those have processes with them. So it really depends on kind of what technology you've got and what the best fit to get you in front of and get you in a government contract would be.
That's quite interesting. I did not know that. And when it comes to strategic partnerships, especially what you do, what do you think is the most important thing a company should have to make it happen?
Well, again, I go back to it's got to be a technology that's going to be advantageous to the government, something the government doesn't have or that is better than what the government has. Because really, I'm not going to represent somebody that's okay. Because the government has plenty of okay. They need excellence. And especially in these times where, there's fewer government employees, we have to help the ones that are still there. And the best and easiest way to do that is through the use of technology to help them be able to be more effective with their time and their investigative or intelligence gathering capabilities.
Oh, that's quite interesting. And in that process, what you're doing is you basically have to then that's where the strategy comes in. How do you decide when to make a warm introduction versus advising someone to refine their strategy first?
Well, a lot of times it'll depend on what their existing strategy is to start off with. Like I said, that's typically I start with the strategy first because that's just what I do. Now, again, some of my clients just want to do business development. They don't want to bring me on as a strategic advisor, and that's fine. I don't mind that. But I still, even with the business development piece, it's okay. Where do you think you want to go? Do I have connections there, which I typically know somebody somewhere who can help me navigate their agency's bureaucracy to get me in touch with the right person. And then, what's your timeline? Because I think the other thing too is most companies don't realize how slowly federal government procurement can go. Unless it's something that's needed right now for an existing threat. It typically takes extraordinarily long time frame for what a company would expect or imagine. Because I think most companies are used to just doing a business deal, and once the business deal is inked, you're good to move forward and purchase and sell, or do your own, kind of private industry procurement. With the government, it there's a lot of steps involved, and it takes time, and the government has never been known for being the most efficient. Um, but I think part of that's to make sure that due diligence is done and the company has been checked out, and it's not being owned by a nation state adversary or something like that. So trying to make sure I understand their strategy is really the first step. And then once we have it locked in and okay, yes, the product you have is something exceptional, or very unique. Operationally, I can make a justification as to how it could be used in helping operational folks inside the government. Then the next question is just where, which agencies, what organizations, and then even inside of those, there's certain products that they're not good for an enterprise use across an agency, but they're really good for certain units or sections or divisions with inside of an organization to try to get those partnerships linked up, those warm introductions made. That's really where I kind of focus and put my time and attention.
Okay. And if people, so you're saying you're looking for the business that has the right stuff. That's what you're looking for. Because
Yes, to
when you're
quote the old
especially,
movie, yes.
yeah, exactly. All right. Best place people can connect. Again, the podcast is now, you have Jody Corbett on YouTube and then also on LinkedIn, but also you have your website, right?
Yes, yeah, you can connect me through my website, sls.consulting.
All right. Thanks again, Jody. Appreciate it. Make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. That was the special simulcast, trimulcast of the Neil Haley Show, the Storehouse Media Group podcast, and Jesus and Ugly Jody.